So the first thing that I think is really important for us to look at is how patterns are created and how we create a conditioned response. I've said this time and time again on our live Periscope episodes, on our Instagram stories, on our Facebook, on our YouTube. What the dog knows least must come first in the sequence. So if you want to go into Pavlov conditioning response 101 and how to create a conditioned response, he put the bell first in the sequence. So Pavlov was a scientist and he wanted to understand how to create a conditioned response. For example, a gazelle or something else that a lion eats can be downwind of a lion, smell that lion, and know I gotta take off. But the interesting thing about that is that the smell of a lion has never caused damage to that gazelle or that antelope. So it's really fascinating. How has that gazelle made the connection that bad things are coming? It's because the smell has come first in the sequence. But Pavlov didn't really know this, right? So he's a scientist and he took two groups of dogs. With one group, he used a bell and food. With the other group, he used a bell and electrocution. And we're not talking remote collars, modern today, that are humane. We're talking the floors were electrocuted. It's what scientists do, right? But what he wanted to do was he wanted to condition the bell, which at the time meant absolutely nothing to the dogs. So when I say condition, I mean give it meaning, give it representation. When that bell rings, it means X, Y, or Z, right? So in the beginning of the study, what he did was with the food group, he would feed, ring the bell, feed, ring the bell, feed, ring the bell, feed, ring the bell. Did that about 500 times. With the electrocution group, he would shock, ring the bell, shock, ring the bell about 500 times. And you would think, and at least he thought, that after 500 reps of pairing it, that it would be something that was now conditioned. For this group, they would expect the shock. For this group, they would expect the food. So then, independently, he rang that bell. The food group, nothing happened. The electrocution group, nothing happened. So he's scratching his head trying to figure this out, trying to understand how he can pair something, and the connection wasn't made. So then what he did was he changed the order of sequence. He put the bell first. Bell, feed, bell, feed, bell, feed. Repeated about 500 times. Bell, shock, bell, shock, bell, shock. Repeated about 500 times. Then independently, for the food group, he'd ring the bell. The dog started salivating, drooling, right? He was like, oh my God, eureka, I finally figured it out. The bell finally means something. Then he went to the electrocution group, rang the bell, and they started to flinch. So he's excited. He's like, oh my gosh, I know how to create a conditioned response. So this teaches us one thing that's super, super, super important. What the dog knows least must come first. This is important when you're trying to teach anything that is new to a dog. A certain type of collar, a remote collar, a prong collar, a certain verbal marker, commands. Many people struggle with their dogs and fall victim of becoming repeat whores. Sit, 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 stay. No, not stay, down. Do you know down? And they'll repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And they'll get the dog into the sit, they'll get the dog into the down, but what happens is the order of sequence overshadows the word. For example, down, the dog doesn't down. Down, the dog doesn't down. My hand gesture or my leash, down, and then the dog does it. Because my hand gesture and my leash is coming first, the dog is never actually going to learn the word. Just like the bell. In this sequence, down would be the bell. Now you can totally reverse that. If you were trying to strengthen leash pressure, if you were trying to strengthen remote, whatever the dog knows least as a means of communication should come first in the sequence if you're trying to strengthen that. So that's the first thing that the study does. Pavlov continues the study and tries to kind of elongate on time, meaning he's going to ring the bell and only feed at 30 minutes. He's going to ring the bell and only shock at 30 minutes. And he would repeat that for a while, and dogs would salivate up to 30 minutes. Roughly around 30 minutes, dogs were flinching, right? So he then looks to expand this. And this is where I butcher the time. I'm not sure exactly how far he was pushing, but let's assume he was pushing an hour. He'd ring the bell and wasn't planning on feeding for an hour, but dogs would salivate for roughly up to 30 minutes. I don't know the exact time. He would ring the bell for the electrocution group and wasn't planning on electrocuting them until 60 minutes, but roughly around 30 minutes, dogs were flinching. So the second thing that this teaches us that is very, very important to understand is that the belief that you have to correct or you have to reward the moment a dog does something is actually not true, as long as you market the moment it happens. It's the very reason why my dog can be across a football field, and if I tell him down and he downs, I can mark it with, if you're familiar with our verbal markers, we have a whole separate video on this. I can mark it with a good, which means keep doing what you're doing, then proceed to walk across the football field and feed him, and that reward will be associated with him downing because I marked it the moment that it happened. So what markers do, and we spoke about this in our verbal markers, is it buys us humans who are never going to be perfect with our timing time to make it right. Now, to be fair, he was working in a sterile environment with no distractions, so you're technically not gonna catch a dog and walk into them after they've soiled on your carpet, and if they were in the middle of eating a bone or doing something proper, like laying on their bed, and you correct them, they could associate it with that. But just to give you an idea, you have time. So markers, if you mark it the moment it happens, gives you time to go forward. So understanding how to create better habits and how to create conditioned response is a very good place to start.